Hey guys, it's Miss Garcia again. We're going to go over today's lesson on literary devices. You'll be able to find this lesson under first 9 weeks, week of August 24th, and day 1, which is a Monday. So when you're looking at this, it should be Monday. So this lesson is a little long. It's going to go over 2 days. So I'm going to break it up, and this video will cover both days, okay? So a lot of our lessons in the future are going to be like this. I'm not going to be able to compact all lessons into one day, so sometimes they kind of spill over into several days. So just keep that in mind. All right, and so these literary devices are pretty important. Today we're going to go over the literary devices from 1 through 5. But first, what are literary devices, right? Some of you may know what it is, some of you may not. So just a quick recap. Literary devices are techniques or ways that writers use to add meaning in order to make stories more compelling or interesting for readers. So think of it this way. If you asked me what I did yesterday and I was like, I went to the store, I came home, I went to bed. It's a pretty boring story, right? Like you're going to be like, Miss Garcia, I'm already asleep. But if I add some literary devices and I become more descriptive, it becomes more interesting. So if I was like, I went to the store and it was just packed as if it was Mardi Gras, and there was a loud bang that sounded like, 1,000 drums, and, just made it more interesting. You're going to be more inclined to pay attention. So these are definitely tricks that writers use to make the reader more engaged. So how many literary devices are there? There are countless, or many literary devices, and you will learn new ones throughout the year. However, you will learn the top 11 to start with. Okay, so these are the most commonly used ones. I'm not saying they're the most important ones or the only ones we use. They're just the most common, okay? So the top 11. We have simile, metaphor, imagery, symbolism, illusion, personification, foreshadowing, hyperbole, diction, repetition, and onomatopoeia. Okay, I love saying onomatopoeia. I do not like spelling onomatopoeia. So whenever you guys get back to class, or sometimes even when I'm writing stuff out for you, I'm just going to put ono, okay? And I don't expect you to remember how to spell onomatopoeia either. So today, again, we're only going through the first 5. So we're going to look over simile, metaphor, imagery, symbolism, and illusion. So before we start, do not stress out if you struggle to understand some of these. We're going to be reviewing, identifying, and using them throughout the year. So by the end of the year, you're going to be a top 11 literary devices pro. You're going to be able to rattle them off so fast that you're going to be very impressive, let me just say. Okay? So let's get started. So, simile. It's like that as if. So I tend to come up with these little phrases to help students and myself remember what these literary devices are. So like you see here, like and as is underlined because a simile is a comparison using like or as. We do this all day, every day. We do it so often we don't even realize it. It's our most common literary device used just in general, okay? As long as you're making a comparison and you use like or as, that is a simile. And the like or as part is very important. So let's just take a look at some examples. And before that, just a trick of the English trade. I like to share little tricks with you guys, or formulas. When using as, there will normally be 2 as. So the formula is as plus a descriptor and then as again. And you'll see what I mean. The little girl was as pretty as a doll. So again, here's 2 as, and here's the descriptor in the middle. So that is a simile. Tanya was thin like a stick. This is a simile because we have like. It's comparing Tanya to the stick. Frank was as desperate as Plankton trying to get a Krabby Patty. So again, here's our formula, as, descriptor, as, and it's saying that Frank is compared to Plankton. Christie's painting was so good it looked like a real garden. So here the simile is with like, and it's comparing the actual painting to a garden. So what do we know? That means that the painting is more like a garden. It's most likely of a garden, okay? So Tristan was as hyper as Tigger, which caused him to always be hungry like Winnie the Pooh. So this shows you how often we use similes, because there's 2 of them within the sentence. So here's our first one with the as. There's two of them, as, hyper, as. So as, descriptor, as. And then Tigger is from Winnie the Pooh. And he jumps all over the place. And just so you know, Tristan is my youngest son, and he is crazy. I love him to death, but he's insane. And he's always moving, always jumping, which causes him to be like Winnie the Pooh, who is always hungry. So I'm comparing him to both Tigger and Winnie the Pooh, using both as and like. Okay, so this one should be relatively easy because, again, you guys use this all the time. So, metaphor. What a comparison. So you might be saying, wait, Ms. Garcia, you just said similes are comparison. Remember, a simile is only a comparison that uses like or as. Any other comparison that does not have like or as will be a metaphor. So a metaphor is a comparison without using like or as, and it is used to emphasize the meaning of what they are saying. The comparisons are often unrelated or unlike each other. Okay, so there is a small video here that you can watch that will help you, but let's take a look at some text examples. Jeremy is the shining star of the class because he knows all the answers. So the comparison is that Jeremy is the smartest in class. It's comparing him to like a bright star, right? So he outshines everybody. So that's the reason that is a metaphor. There is no like or as in it, but it's still a comparison. The homework was a breeze. We know that to mean that homework was easy, but it's comparing homework to the wind. And do we have to do anything for the wind? No. The wind's just there. So that's the same thing. It's just that easy. The student responses were music to Miss Garcia's ears. We know that to mean that the student's answers made Miss Garcia happy because it's comparing your answers to music, which I love, right? So it's comparing it to something that I love without using like or as. Therefore, it's a metaphor. The lake was a mirror to the night sky. So that normally means the lake was flat and reflected the night sun. And so the mirrors reflect things to us, so it's comparing the lake and a mirror. And finally, her son's betrayal was 1,000 stabs to her heart. So we could take that to mean the son's betrayal caused his mother pain, like physical pain, because we all know without getting stabbed that it probably hurts, right? So it's comparing the betrayal to that type of pain without using like or as. So just a quick recap. Simile, comparison with like or as. Any other comparisons that do not use like or as, they will be a metaphor. So what a comparison. Moving on. Imagery. Okay, and this is another one that we tend to use a lot. And so if you think about it, imagery is image, that's a picture, so I get the picture. So what is it? It's language used to create a picture or visual image. Have you ever read something or heard somebody describe something and you start to build the picture in your head? If you're doing that, that means they're using imagery. So let's look at some examples. And these ones tend to be a little bit lengthier because for a good image to be put in your head, you have to use details. And I'm going to be talking to you about details all year long because I'm always going to want details. So, outside, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold. Down in the street, little eddies of wind were whirling dust and torn paper into spirals, and though the sun was shining and the sky was a harsh blue, there seemed to be no color in anything, except the posters that were plastered everywhere. The black mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. Okay, so this is from 1984 from George Orwell. And the thing about imagery and descriptions is that we use our prior experiences to help us build that picture. So some of us know what it's like when things look cold, right? Have you ever been looking through the window and you're kind of sad and you're gloomy and you look out the window and you're like, oh, even though it's bright outside, it just feels cold. That's what that's trying to say. We've also seen sometimes when it's a little bit windy, but the street is deserted and you see trash kind of floating down the street, right? So we've all seen these little aspects and it helps us build that picture. And you see how detailed it is, and that helps us build it. So Sometimes it won't be as long as that one. So the old tired man shook as the wind blew against him. Slowly he bent down and grabbed a handful of hard dirt and let it fall through his fingers. So the imagery in here is, think of that old man. Is he fat? Is he skinny? It's saying the wind is shaking him, so that helps you think, okay, he has to be skinny for the wind to be shaking him. And slowly he's bending down. So he's not just old, he's probably like old, older than Miss Garcia, kind of having trouble bending down to pick up that dirt. And that dirt must mean something to him for him to be that frail and to pick up that hard dirt, right? So that means that dirt is also dry, and let it fall through his fingers. When we let that phrase fall through your fingers, that's normally that means a missed opportunity, right? So maybe he's regretful. So do you see the kind of picture that it's painting? This frail old man trying to stand up against this harsh wind, trying to bend over to grab something that must have been precious to him, but it's falling through his fingers. It's a lost opportunity. See? So that's how imagery works. Let's take a look at another one. The bright sun shone through the thin, dirty curtains and warmed the young girl's face. The girl, however, shut her eyes even tighter against the light and refused to rise from her bed. Instead, she pulled the heavy covers over her head and blocked out the morning. Okay, so this one should be easy for you guys to imagine, because I don't know about you, but there's many a mornings where I'm like not doing it, I'm not getting up, and I'm trying to like hide in my bed. That's what this girl is doing. But we can also learn something from these details, from this picture that's being painted. So the bright sun shone through the thin, dirty curtains. So she does not come from wealth, right? She's probably poor, right? It's probably summer because it's a bright sky, bright sun, and it's shining through and it warms her face, right? So it's trying to wake her up. The girl, however, shuts her eyes even tighter against the light. So she's clamping her eyes shut. And have you ever done that when I don't want to see it? I don't want to get up. I'm going to stay here. And she pulled the heavy covers over her head. So she has a thick cover, right? And she's trying to block out the morning. We've all done that. She doesn't want to wake up. So do you see how that's more interesting than just simply saying the girl didn't want to wake up, right? That's not that interesting. But this kind of paints the picture for you. All right. Rain drops the size of bullets. Bullets thunder on the castle windows. The flower beds turn into muddy streams, and Hagrid's pumpkins swell to the size of garden sheds. That is an excerpt from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I'm a Harry Potter fan, so just so you know. So let's talk about this. It's painting a picture, right? Instead of just saying it's raining outside. She's trying to really paint that picture. So rain drops the size of bullets. So have you ever been outside when it starts to rain and it's real big raindrops and it almost hurts, right? They're coming down and it's hard. Those are the type of raindrops that are coming. And it's thundering against the castle windows. So it's making a noise against the actual windows. And we all know what that sounds like. It doesn't rain that often in Texas, but we know what it's like when the rain does hit the windows. So now you can actually not only see it, but maybe you're hearing it in your head. And we know it's not a light drizzle, one, because she talks about how big the rain is, but then she's talking about that the flower beds turn into muddy streams. So when it just sprinkles, our flower beds don't turn into like rivers or streams, but when it's raining. So we can get the idea that it's raining hard and it's been raining for a little while. And then Hagrid's pumpkins swell to the size of garden sheds. So that means the pumpkins are becoming waterlogged, right? They're soaking up that water and they're getting big. And it's using a metaphor, right? It's comparing the pumpkins to a garden shed, and we know that garden sheds tend to be big. So these are some big pumpkins. So that's a lot of rain and everything is water soaked. Okay, so that's the image it's painting for you. Okay, finally, the little boy jumped with joy. His face was covered in chocolate, but you could still see his tiny white teeth as he smiled the biggest smile ever. His chubby cheeks began to bounce and turn rosy pink as he burst out laughing with happiness. So I don't know about you, but the minute I start reading that, I picture a cute little boy with these big old cheeks, right? We've all seen him. Um, we know that he's happy because he's jumping with joy. So he has a lot of energy. And we know why he's also happy because he's covered in chocolate, which means he's probably eating chocolate. And I don't know about you, but when Miss Garcia eats chocolate, she is very happy, right? So this little boy is very happy, and he has those clean little teeth, and you can envision all that chocolate on his face, and his teeth are just peering through with the biggest smile ever. So his chubby cheeks began to bounce and turn rosy pink as he burst out laughing with happiness. So this is a really joyful picture, right? In comparison maybe to the old man or the rain, right? This is a very happy image it's painting, a very happy tone. So that's what imagery does. It helps create that picture, that image in your head so that you can understand it more, and become more engaged with it. It takes you there. So, imagery, I get the picture. Symbolism. Okay, so it's all about representation. So, here's the thing about symbolism, okay? It is the use of people or objects within a story to represent an idea. But here's the kicker: not all symbols mean the same thing to everyone. So, you have to be mindful of what type of image you're trying to represent, and make sure that people understand what you're talking about. So, for example, when you meet me, I have a dragonfly tattoo on my wrist, right? Most people see it. Hey, that's an insect. They don't think it really means anything, right? But what if I were to tell you that that dragonfly represents the people that I loved that I've lost and that they're always with me, right? Because I once read that dragonflies are spirits from the heavens that come to visit you. So it's very symbolic to me, the dragonfly, that it represents my family and friends. But to you, that symbol has no meaning. It's just a dragonfly. It's an insect, Miss Garcia. It doesn't mean anything. So again, you have to be careful of that. Another example is, let's take the US flag, right? It's very symbolic to Americans. It represents our pride in our country. You know, we stand, we make a pledge to it. It's very symbolic. It is the symbol of the United States. However, if you take that same flag and maybe take it to a different country that is not happy with the United States, they do not look at that with pride. To them, that's a symbol of something very different. So you have to be careful when using symbols, okay? But there are some universal ones. Again, here's a little video that you can watch talking about it a little bit more. But let's look at some examples. So the Ellison eagle, it represents strength, determination, and pride. Two Ellison eagles, right? So again, two Ellison eagles, that's what it represents. But I mean, Shoemaker and Harker Heights and Colleen may see it very differently, right? They see that as an opponent, a symbol of their opponent. An expensive car and clothes, that tends to be symbolic of wealth and having lots of money. An image of a book tends to be the universal symbol for knowledge and learning. The Avengers A, right? So if you're a huge Marvel fan, you know what that represents. That means heroes with special powers that will protect the world. But if you don't watch the Avengers, if you're like, Miss Garcia, I'm not that type of nerd, I'm not into that, it may not mean the same thing to you, okay? But that's what it's meant to symbolize. And then finally, again, the American flag. To Americans, that does stand for independence and unity. But when you take that same flag, that same symbol around the world, it means something different. So with symbols, you need to be very cognizant or aware of your readers, where you're at, and have some understanding of what type of symbols represent what, where you're at, okay? So there's that. Now, the final one for today. This is allusion, not illusion, allusion. So the way you're going to remember that is, I get what you're saying, okay? Because it's a hint, or when the author is speaking or referring directly or indirectly to a person, event, or thing. So, much like symbols, allusions only work if the person reading them or receiving the allusion knows what you're talking about. Okay, so for example, Miss Garcia could say something like, I am as happy as Li Bo by the river, right? If I'm in college, in my Chinese poetry class, with my mentor, Dr. Lai, she's going to get that hint. She's going to get that allusion. She's going to be like, oh, Li Bo, Chinese poet. He was always happy when he was by the river. He would always dance at night. She gets it. Everyone else, though, has no idea what I'm talking about unless they're Chinese and study Chinese poetry, right? You have to be mindful of who you're talking to and make sure that the people know what you're referring to for an allusion to work. So, another thing that you need to know, the most alluded to text is the Bible. So, like the Garden of Eden, right? It was so beautiful, it was like the Garden of Eden. Well, that's from the Bible. So, the Bible is one of the most alluded to or most used allusions text in the world. So, just know that. That's a hint that does come up later. But again, it's very, very important that for it to work, you have to know. So, this is why reading is important. The more you read, the more you'll understand illusions. And I say this is because books and text tend to refer back to previous books and text. And the more you know about that, the more you learn about it, the easier it will be for you to understand text in the future. Okay? And when I say text, I don't mean text messaging. I mean the actual like documents with words on it. So let's take a look at some examples. The park was so beautiful. It was like walking in the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Eden, sorry. Again, that's a hint of the Bible, meaning it's perfect and it's like a paradise. But if you've never read the Bible, if you've never heard of the Garden of Eden, you would never know what that meant. The man was such a Scrooge. He never helped anyone. So that is hinting to A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens and means the person is greedy and cares only about themselves. So I grew up on the classic of this story of Scrooge, but also think of Scrooge McDuck, right? From DuckTales. Maybe that is even too old for you, but the Christmas Carol is often shown every year, and maybe I'll show it to you guys just so that you have an idea of what it's talking about. Chocolate is my Achilles heel. Okay, so Achilles is from Greek mythology, and it means that that's my weakness. So there's a story of Achilles. He was part god, and when they go to baptize him, they put him in this water to make him invincible, but they have to hold him. So they're holding him by his heel. So that's the only part that's not protected. So that later, when he is killed, it's because he shot in his heel. Again, this is a story from Greek mythology, which is, hint, the second most used allusion in the world. So you have the Bible, then Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology. So there are actually some pretty cool stories. There's a lot of battling in them and stuff. So maybe we will look at some of those one day. So again, this allusion will not work. This hint will not work if the person doesn't know what you're talking about. Okay. So Christopher is such a Romeo, hinting at Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, and it means the person is charming, handsome, and a romantic. Now, this is when I talk about reading is very important, or even just your prior experiences, because even if you've never read Romeo and Juliet, it is referred to so often that we all know what that means to be a Romeo. Okay, so sometimes you will know and understand the hint, even if you've never had an experience with the direct text. You'll still know from prior knowledge. So that's why prior knowledge is really important. Connect to those experiences. Use what you know to get you through. And then finally, the kid is such an Einstein, right? So hinting at Albert Einstein, and that means the person is extremely smart or intelligent. So that's when we often will talk about like the smartest person ever, because Albert Einstein was super smart, right? If you've ever taken a science class or you've heard E equals MC squared, that's from Albert Einstein, and that means next level smart. So not just a little smart, it's hinting that that person is super smart. So illusion is I get what you're saying. I get it. I get the hint you're trying to give me, right? Wink, wink. So I want you to think about that whenever you're annotating or reading a text, right? Because people allude to things all the time. So, all right, class, that are the five. Those are the five literary devices we are going to cover today. Um, this is always going to be up so that you will be able to refer back to it because you're going to need to identify these throughout the school year. You're going to be asked to create some of your own because it just makes your writing a lot stronger. So, if you have any questions, go back and review it. Again, it's always going to be here. It is considered like a foundational type of information so that you can always refer back to it and build upon it because we're going to learn more literary devices. So we'll learn the other 5 or 6 tomorrow. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Bye, guys.